Well, I'm not able to share my screen for some reason.
My gosh. Yo también estoy teniendo algo de problemas, no veo. Son many. Yeah. Se me eliminó la pantalla donde estaban todos. No sé qué pasó. Solo puedo ver un documento que
It's
dice.
probably something I've done.
I think
Oh,
Benny
está.
still has to share. Yeah.
Let me go to my other computer. I'm sorry, but my this other thing isn't set up right yet.
Benny, let me find the slides that you sent me, and then I can hopefully share my screen, and then we can just get rolling, and then you
Okay.
can just tell me when to change the screen.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, it might work best, Benny. Could you send me those again one more time? And then I can pull them up.
Oh, wrong one. I'm sorry, it's the wrong one.
Okay.
God.
Great. We'll get rolling here. All right, Benny, do you want to take it away?
Okay. Guys, I apologize for the delay. So I've got a new toy that I'm not familiar with. So. But welcome to the session that's where we're going to explore governance and decision-making. It's brought to you by the Southeast Center for Cooperative Development. My name is Benny Overton. I'm one of the co-directors of the center, along with Rosemarie Rieger. And Gretchen Trest is here with us. She is our cooperative development specialist. And it was through a lot of her organizing that this is possible. She pointed out the need for this, and we are happy to accommodate. So thank you guys for coming, spending the evening with us. And we hope to, in this exploration of governance, give you a clear idea and a starting point for how you can develop governance for your cooperative. I know that it's an area of great concern to many, and we've received a lot of questions, inquiries about governance and how to go about developing governance. and we thought this session would help. And let me say that tonight, or let me back up. Let me say that you shouldn't become overly concerned with developing the comprehensive governance. That's something that you're not going to do in one setting or at one time. Governance is something that will evolve over time. There's no way you're going to put it all together in one comprehensive document, just starting out. It just doesn't happen like that. But besides, it's something that is developed with the, I guess, knowledge of what your members need, a knowledge of how you guys best operate together or should operate together. And so it's something that's going to take time. But what we hope to do tonight is give you a good starting point. So, and again, this presentation will be dual language. So we can go to the next slide so that the Spanish language slide should have been next. I'm sorry. Let me ask our Spanish speakers, do you have access to your copy in Spanish?
Yo la tengo disponible en mi teléfono. No la pude abrir en el chat, pero la tengo en el teléfono, así que no tengo ningún inconveniente.
Does everyone else have it? Or first of all, let me back up again. The language translation selection. Is everyone aware of that? Are those who need the translation service, have you been able to get that already?
Yo también ya lo recibí, gracias.
If at any time you guys, if this becomes difficult for the translation, because we have slides in the Spanish language, but I was not able to send those back to Gretchen, I'm sorry. I sent the wrong ones. But I'll go on from here. And what we'll do, I'll take a few minutes break in about 10, 15 minutes. And we try to get the rest of these slides up, I'm sorry. And I'll take my time and just discuss this right now. And Arrayas, I'll rely on you to translate for me, please. But when looking at management versus governance, that's one of the things I wanted to make clear tonight, that the two are quite distinct. Management is more operational. It is focused on operations. It's concerned with present operation, whereas governance is more concerned with long-term directions, goals. And I think an analogy that I will present to kind of explain this is, say you're taking a road trip along a winding mountainous road. So on this trip, management can be thought of as how the driver chooses to drive the car along this route, while governance can be thought of as the route and the guardrails along the route that ensures that you travel within the confines of the chosen path. In other words, the guardrails and the route are designed to get you from point A to point B over the long term and protect you and keep you within the confines of the path. That's governance. And the guardrails for governance is basically the framework of our purpose, vision, the values, principles, even the laws and regulations that we have to adhere to. All of these are the confines and the guardrails within which we have to travel. That's governance. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to share with you this short film, because so much of what we're doing starts with our vision and the purpose or the mission of what the co-op is formed. Because the vision and the mission defines not only your purpose, but how you choose to get there, your values, your principles, the co-op principles. All of these are important when it comes to determining governance. So if you will, click on that and start the film. Okay. You have to enable content, I think. There you go.
Can folks hear that?
No.
No, okay, 1 second. Sorry about that.
Do you know what your organization's mission is? When everything else Do you know what your organization's mission is? When everything else is stripped away, what is its core? Do you know what your organization's mission is? When everything else is stripped away, what is its core purpose? And why are team members motivated to come to work every day? Most companies have a driving purpose, but sometimes this isn't well defined, and often team members don't know what it is. This is why taking time to create a mission and vision statement for your organization is so worthwhile. Not only will this define your business's true purpose, but it will also give your team a focus. When people have a purpose they understand and are passionate about, their work becomes more exciting and meaningful. Just reflect on how much happier you are when you're working towards something that you know helps other people. And when team members work for an organization with values they believe in, a business can be transformed. First, though, let's look at what mission and vision statements are. A mission statement defines your organization's purpose and primary objectives. It also sets out its goals and how you're going to measure them. For instance, imagine you work for a major airline with this mission statement: to be the most reliable airline in the industry for on-time arrivals and to have the lowest number of customer complaints. So, to write out your own mission statement, first identify your organization's winning idea. Why was it founded? What distinguishes it in the marketplace? What do its leaders want to achieve? Then think about how you truly want to measure success. Remember, this doesn't have to be about the bottom line alone. In our example, success is measured by being number one in on-time arrivals and by having the lowest number of customer complaints. Keep working at this until you can combine your organization's purpose and success measures into one powerful, concise statement. Once you finalize this, you can move on to your vision statement. Now, look at your mission statement again. What's the underlying human value of what you have written? Remember the mission statement we created for the airline? The organization wants to reduce stress for its customers and help them enjoy travel. So its vision statement might say, we help travelers have a stress-free and enjoyable flight. We get people to their destination happy and on time. Do you see how the vision statement is more emotional? It sounds like a partnership between the airline and its customers. This is an idea that the airline team members can really get excited about. Your own vision statement should be similar, emotional, and compelling. And when you read it, you should feel enthusiastic about what you're doing. Developing mission and vision statements can motivate your team or organization to realize an inspiring vision of the future. You can find out more about creating mission and vision statements in the article that accompanies this video.
Well, I wanted you to see that because the vision is an important cornerstone in the development of governance, because it sets the framework for how we will operate and what we hope to accomplish, what's important to us as an organization. You know, part of the compelling reasons you form co-ops is because you're looking to fulfill some unmet needs. Here they talk about vision and mission in terms of customers, but you can also think of it in terms of the worker members. You know, what are some of the needs of the workers and the members, the worker owners that prompted you to form a co-op? These are the things that we should keep in mind when we start to think about governance. These are part of the guardrails that we want to erect to keep us on this path of fulfilling those needs. You know, this along with our values and principles that as the membership as a whole, we can agree to adhere to. These become important dimensions and ingredients of the governance documents that we hope to create. So you can go to the next one.
Do you?
Benny, keep going ahead. I'm gonna switch to the slides you just sent me.
Okay. Well, the next thing we want to look at is just what are the governance documents? And Gretchen will put those up here shortly. But basically, for co-ops, there's two primary organizational forms here in the States, either through corporations or in Tennessee, particularly LLC, the limited liability companies. Some states have specific statutes of cooperatives. And you know, have cooperative co-ops. It has a separate statute. But here in Tennessee, it doesn't. So we have to try to accommodate co-ops as best we can. And one of the preferred methods is through LLC because they tend to be more flexible and more easily formed. But the documents, you can go to the next one if you know. The documents are for corporations, articles of incorporation and bylaws. Now, the articles of incorporations are charter documents. That means these are the documents that put the organization into existence. The actual governance document would be the bylaws. For LLC, limited liability companies, the articles of organization is the charter document. The actual governance document would be the operating agreement. And I've got some templates of each of those on another slide. And we'll look at some of these later, but these are the important documents of governance. So something I wanted to point out to you and ask you to be aware of. And it's something that was taken from the California Code because they have their co-op code. But it's language that I would advise you to include in your charter document, which says that the election to be organized as a worker cooperative or as an employment cooperative does not create a presumption that workers are employees of the corporations for any purposes. I'm going to repeat that. You should state somewhere in your document that the election to be organized as a worker cooperative or an employment cooperative does not create a presumption that workers are employees of a corporation for any purposes. And the reason for that is because the presumption of being worker employees is strong, and to cast the perception that we are actually owners, are in fact owners, and perhaps avoid some of the problems of being viewed as employees, it's important that we put everything that we can in our favor of ownership, to express ownership. And there's one statement that could help, particularly when we look at some of the structures or some of the other provisions that we would have to adopt, like the subchapter T, which we'll discuss later, that gives the appearance of you being an employee for employment law purposes. We may want to avoid that. So it's good to have that clause included. And the articles should also provide a purpose of the organization. And you want to include a broad language such as in your articles, to operate as a company controlled democratically by the members as defined in the operating agreement. Now, this is a statement you can include in your articles of organization or incorporation. And I'll repeat that. It says the purpose, and you want to, again, state this as broadly as possible. So I recommend this language: to operate as a company controlled democratically by the members as defined in the operating agreement. And this clearly indicates your purpose or your intention of operating as a cooperative. Okay, you can go through the next. If you could, you can go back to the other one and let those the Spanish-speaking audience see just what we were talking about. The distinction between the corporations and the LLC. Actually, they're similar, but one is articles of incorporations, the other is articles of organization. Then the governance document itself would be the bylaws for the corporations and the operating agreement for the LLC. Okay. Here I just wanted to show you roughly just what some of the steps are in order to develop governance and to get to that point. You're just starting off, so basically you are the group or the founding group, and this could be a founding committee or the steering committee, whatever you wish to call yourselves. You come together and choose a name for your cooperative. Then you would file your charter, and this is either the Articles of Incorporations or the Articles of Organization. You file that with the state. In this charter, you will identify your registered agent, and that's just someone who will receive any documents via the mail or any thing from the government or whatever, this person is responsible for receiving that. And that's the registered agent. Any legal documents or whatever the registered agent would receive. So you want to point all that out in your articles of incorporation or organization. And at the same time, the founding committee or the steering committee should start preparing the bylaws or operating agreement. Now, you'll complete these or come to some point where you feel like they are adequately completed. Of course, the charter is already filed. The bylaws or operating agreement do not have to be filed with the state. These are internal documents. The charter is a public document. You file that with the state. But the operating agreement are internal documents. That's for your use. And this is something that once you formally come together, the members will elect a board, perhaps, or decide to act as a board. And it's the board that will vote to adopt the bylaws that you just developed. You will do that sometime during the first year, because you will elect the board members who served the initial term. And it's this board member would then vote whether or not to adopt the bylaws as they're ready. Okay, on the next. And here's some of the templates that I wanted to share with you. And again, the first one is just a list of resources for states that covers the cooperative statutes that they may have. Again, here in Tennessee, we don't have specific cooperative statutes. So we use very much so the LLC. You can also incorporate, but LLC tends to be a bit more flexible. And we have the, I guess the form, the template that we'll look at tonight is the LLC text as the T Corp. We want to look at that operating agreement. We also have the bylaws, and that's the last thing listed, and that's for incorporating. You have bylaws. But, and the other LLC is one with permanent capital. And this is just another structure. I'll talk about that briefly later, but it's just a means of ownership, basically, so that you would have one LLC, subsidiary LLC, that would be a member along with the other members. And that was for the purpose of retaining earnings. And I'll talk more about that later. Okay, you want to send those links? Yes. Yes, we can. Okay, you can go to the next one. Oh. Again, it's the third link that we would want to look at tonight. We're going to actually have an activity and use. Here we want to look at some of the possible organizing and decision-making options. Here we're assuming that this is a fairly medium-sized organization where you have the members elect a board of directors. The board of directors would then hire a manager. The manager would then oversee the operations or the functioning of the members. You know, and organizing, decision-making runs the continuum from direct democracy to a representative democracy. And this tends to be more like the representative democracy, where you have a board of directors that's actually represent the interests of the members and some of the more long-term strategic goal setting that happens in a cooperative. they have delegated authority to make decisions. Okay, next one. Now, in some of the smaller cooperatives particularly, but this could be applicable to any size, perhaps, but particularly in smaller size, all the members are actually part of the operating committees, the various committees, rather than a board of directors. You might have all the members perhaps do like HR function. You have a committee for that. You have a committee that handles grievances. A committee that looks at the governance structure, governance committee. But particularly in the smaller co-ops, you have no choice but to have all the members act as the committee. It could be that all the members, especially if you have a co-op that's 3 or 4 members, all the members do it all. But even if you opt to, I say, hire a manager, I guess one of the things to keep in mind is that in the co-op, one of the things that we want to preserve is democracy. Democracy is the cornerstone and the centerpiece of the co-op. So even if you hire a manager, it doesn't mean that all the decision-making is to be done by management. As a matter of fact, the worker owners could retain decision-making authority, even with managers. And the managers simply act as resources, additional resources for perhaps feedback, performance evaluation, for personnel development, et cetera. See any questions about any of this organizing? But the thing that we want to do, and we want to make sure that we preserve in the governance, is the right of workers to engage in workplace democracy. You know, there's 2 fundamental rights that we as worker owners will have. One is economic rights. That's the right to share the surplus and the right to have a say in the economic well-being of the organization. So you have the economic rights, but you also have the management rights, the decision-making rights, the rights to be involved in decision-making, which is very key. Okay, you go to the next one. So in your co-op, one of the things I would urge you to do is look for ways to infuse democracy when you can. That means decentralizing decisions so that you don't have an upper layer of if you have management, upper layer of management or even a middle layer of management making decisions. Try to decentralize that and push that out to people as much as possible, to your workers. Get people involved. Try not to have any type of internal competition because that shuts down communication and democracy. And encourage communicating with peers. Encourage and do what you can to accommodate communicating. Now, even for some of the most routine work, and I've seen pretty routine work, there are still opportunities to infuse democracy and engaging workers in workplace democracy. One means is through standardization. Now, you think that standardizing would make things more routine so that you don't have to make decisions, but actually it's just a beginning for involvement of people in decision making, because it's the people who are doing the operation who should first devise the standards, the standardized means of working. And then you want to make sure that whatever standardization you develop, it's not a static standard, but it's dynamic, because you want to be a learning organization. Therefore, you want to allow for continuous improvement. So standardization becomes, I guess, the one best way of doing the work today. But then you want to empower the worker owners to look for ways to improve. Look for ways, experiment, and look for ways to do it better. And when you find those ways, then that becomes the new standard. So in that way, you give people a chance to be involved in decision-making, even for some of the most routine work there is. And this is what I mean by saying, look for ways to infuse democracy throughout the organization. Look for ways to make democracy real. Go to the next question. So that brings us back to governance. And governance is a way that we can instill and preserve democracy. Again, it's the guardrail. It's how policy is developed, communicated, is used to preserve and bolster the democratic character. Now, the ICA group is one who recommend that in our governance system, we make clear the various roles. That's the roles of members, the roles of the board of directors, that include a grievance committee, and the role of management. There's the three primary groups, particularly for the larger co-ops. Be the members, the board, and management. So the governance document that you create should make all of those three roles very clear and distinct as to who's responsible for what and who does what. One of the things you also want to make sure in governance is that the co-op principles and the values that you espouse are evident in the functioning of the cooperative. Again, governance is basically there to guide the long-term strategic thrust of the business, and also to instill and preserve the culture, the cooperative culture. Whereas management is there basically for the day-to-day operations. Okay. Again, this is just another way of I guess, visualizing how governance and structure are interrelated. Because in developing governance, there are some structural considerations. Here, this large group of bodies to your left is the members, that represents the membership, who together elect the board of directors. The board is that group there in the middle. Now, the members of the board together could elect or appoint members of the grievance committee and members of the governance committee. But the board is the one who hires the management. And management hires and supervises the staff that in some organizations, they would oversee the work of the workers. And others, they were there to assist and to aid in personnel development rather than be in an authoritarian position.
Hey, Benny.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this is Brendan. Just a quick
Brendan.
question. the grievance committee
Uh-huh.
is, I'm not quite sure what it's saying here, that this is a council that the board sets up or that the members set up.
It's both. You see, the
Okay.
larger group is the members, and this other smaller group in the middle is the board. They both have a say, in this example, they both have a say in who sits on the grievance committee.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that seems like a useful thing. I'd look into that a little more. Appreciate it.
And the grievance council is very similar to an organization I'm familiar with, and that's unions. Those who have grievances, workers who have grievances for whatever reason, if they're not able to resolve it themselves, you can go to the grievance council. Just like, some workers can go to the union when you have a complaint. And this is particularly helpful for the larger co-ops. When you start to have, especially 50 or more members, it may be beneficial to have something like that. Any other questions from anyone?
Yo tengo una pregunta. ¿El comité de quejas sería más como un comité de resolución de conflictos internos?
Yeah, for any type of, I guess, any type of internal conflict perhaps, or for any individual that feel that they've been aggrieved in some way and they hadn't been able to resolve it, you can go to the grievance committee and they would hear the grievance and they would work as an advocate for the individual to try to get it resolved.
Penny, could you provide an example of like something that would be brought to the grievance committee?
I'll give you an example that I was given. It was, say there was a worker owner who needed some time off, but has used up all their vacation time. But say they had death in the family or death of someone close, and they wanted to attend, and they had went to management to request a day off, but weren't able to get it. And they were willing to, I guess, forfeit one of their other days in order to do this, and they weren't able to get it. So they felt like they had a grievance, and they would go to the grievance committee to try to get it resolved. That's one example. Or it could be where you felt that someone in management perhaps made a decision that was in violation of policy, and that they themselves weren't able to get it resolved. So they would take it to the grievance committee.
Benny, Becca asked in the chat, is it essentially like HR?
Well, in a sense, it's more like a union committee, because this grievance committee acts more like an advocate for the members, for the individual who brings the grievance. Whereas HR typically isn't, at least the HR that I'm familiar with, they typically tend to be more, I guess, sympathetic to management. There's another question, and I didn't get to read it in the chat.
Yeah, could you briefly, I know there's like a lot of similarities, right? Is why you're comparing unions to worker co-ops, but could you briefly describe the difference between a union and a worker co-op?
Basically, it's ownership. In a co-op, the members are owners of the business. Whereas in a union shop, the workers are just employees. They are employees. They have no ownership right. Now, the unions will advocate for workers in order to give them certain rights to have a voice and say some of the decisions that made that will impact their lives, but there's no guarantee they will get it. You know, that's one of the struggles with in a union environment. Whereas in a co-op, the workers are the owners. You know, management there is someone who is ultimately under the authority of the workers, ultimately, indirectly, but ultimately management in a co-op are under the authority of the workers, which is not true in a union environment. Any other questions?
Nope, that looks like that, all the ones in the chat at the very least, I should say.
Okay.
Bueno, yo tengo una pregunta. ¿Este tipo de comités pueden existir tanto en cooperativas como las nuestras, como en cualquier otra organización? ¿Son similares?
Yes, yes. The grievance committee, yes. Yes, it can. And the reason why, because you want someone there, you want some means of someone who would advocate for the
Okay,
rights of the
perfect.
individuals. And particularly when you're working with larger organizations where individuals can tend to get lost. And so they need someone there to ensure that their voice is still heard and that their rights are still honored.
Gracias.
Yeah, it may not be practical for smaller co-ops, but say when you get, say, 20, 30 members, when things start to become more complex, then you may want something like that. Okay, you can go to the next one. View is blocked. Okay, here's another smaller co-op. And again, with small co-ops, although we've got quite a few people there in that group, it's supposed to represent a smaller co-op. And here we found they formed committees to actually do the work that I guess typically management or HR or someone else would do. You have an education committee as an example, a leadership committee, an outreach committee, but there's various committees that form that will actually, everyone is basically board members, and you take on some of the duties and functions of the board in the smaller cooperatives.
Yeah, there's something blocking the middle of the screen.
Yeah, yeah, same here. I don't know what that is.
Does that work better?
Now there's a
No,
different
it's-
shape blocking.
Yeah,
There we
okay,
go.
now it's gone. Okay,
Okay, sorry, I had the chat pulled up. That's good to know that that blocks that.
okay, thanks. But that's all that represents. I've got too many people in that hexagon, I guess it is. I got too many people, should have just been 3 or 4, but it represents the type of structure that's common with smaller organizations. Yeah, you can go ahead. And this one is I was trying to capture a more complex structures where you have 2 classes of membership. And when you have something like that, you can choose an organizations like this where you have, and here this is a real estate cooperative where you have residential members. Some are renters and some are owners. And new members have to be approved by all the members, by consensus vote. The owner members are the one who elect the board, hereby 2/3 supermajority. This is just an example. The board in turn hires the property manager. All of the members collectively elect people to the welcoming committee. All the members collectively select or elect people to form what they call the garden committee. This is more like a landscape committee or something here. This is just an example of what some of the more complex structures could look like with more than 2 classes of membership. And again, this 2/3 majority is just to show you that even though you had the members electing whether or not to accept new members by consensus, there's other forms of democratic voting, and one is the supermajority or 2/3 majority requirement. And that's just to serve as an example of the various forms of governance and here are democratic processes. Any questions about that?
Sí, a mí me gustaría saber qué pasa cuando una cooperativa tiene 3 dueños, por ejemplo, en este caso. ¿Qué se haría?
3 owners, that's a small cooperative. That one is the type, like the example we just seen before, where all 3 of them probably would have to do it all. You are the board, you are everything.
Okay.
So all of these functions will fall for those 3 members.
Okay.
And that's very typical in small co-ops where, I mean, it's just that you don't have the resources to divide it. And it wouldn't be wise, I think, to allow someone sole decision making in some areas. It's best to have the people deciding together on some key areas, key issues. Then again, you could appoint someone to be responsible for the management of certain functions. It's up to the co-op, really. There's no hard set rules as to how you do it, but you look for a way that is everyone can agree to and everyone is comfortable with, and everyone feel that they can commit to. But typically in the small co-op, all the members are going to be involved in most of the decision making. Unless you're comfortable appointing someone as giving someone what you call agency authority. And I'll say a little bit more about that later too. Typically, it's how it's done. You're involved in all the decisions. Should I say all the key decisions anyway? Okay.
Okay. Gracias.
Okay. Okay. I think you can go to the next one, Gretchen. Okay, and next we want to look at who makes what decision and how. And this here, I'm just trying to represent the overall decision-making authority. Of course, it rides with the members. And the members are able to convey some of their authority to the board, of course. And the board makes a decision to hire the management. So, but ultimately, it's the members who have the ultimate decision-making authority because the members elect the board. And the board elects the management. if you choose that route. And one thing I want to point out too, this, you said there's various roles to be filled. But the thing to keep in mind is that these are roles. They're not titles. Especially when you're trying to build horizontal organizations. The one thing you want to kind of avoid is to give them the appearance of hierarchy. And so it's not so much a title, even if someone is in a leadership position, that's a role. And at any given time, anyone could be called upon to fill that role. That's why in co-op, continuing education and training is important, because you want to develop the potential of all the members and utilize them and allow them to grow and develop. So I just want to point that out. It's not titles so much in these various roles, but they are functions that have to be filled, functions that have to be performed, and that's what we do. Okay. Any questions? Now, in deciding who among these three distinct groups makes decisions, and here we're assuming we have a fairly moderate size co-op so that we have members, a board of directors, and management. So who makes what decisions? Okay, you can go to the next one. And here we're looking at between management and the board of directors, who makes the decision? Where there's a test that could help us sort this out, and it's called the extensiveness test. And this is management or board. Who will make the decision? Now, the next slide, we'll start looking at just three areas of the test. Does it affect a large number of members? Does it commit a substantial portion of the organization's resources? And does it have a long-term impact, either on operations, personnel, or resources? This is a measure of how extensive is it. Because if it's something that's extensive, remember, management is for day-to-day operations. If this is something that's going to have an extensive impact, then that's something that the board of directors should decide. It's the board of directors who has decision-making authority in that instance. So if either one of these are true, then it's the board of directors. In fact, a large number of members, it's a commitment of a significant portion of the organizational resources, or something that's going to have a long-lasting, long-term impact, then that's the board of directors should decide. Okay. Any questions? The next decision query is it the membership or the board? Who makes the decision, the members or the board? The test for this is called the significance test. Because the board, you can go to the next one. The board, I'll say this, the board is primarily there to address some of the routine policy matters. And here are the tests, specifically the test says, does the matter affect the likely survival of the cooperative? Does the issue involve policies for hiring or terminating members? And does the matter affect the basic character of the cooperative? And by that, let me give you an example. Say that the co-op was formed for the purpose of serving a particular segment of the population. Say it's there to serve some of the most underserved members of our community. But then, say someone in management determines that, hey, there's a pretty attractive market over here in another part of the city that could be quite profitable. Well, that's something that could really change the character of the co-op that you form. It could really kind of sway you from the original purpose. So that could be pretty significant. In cases of great significance, it's the members who decide. Not the board. Again, the board is handling basically some of the routine policy making. But for the more non-routine matters of significance, something that the membership should decide. And if not decide, at least the board should get the members' approval before they could decide. Because if it's gonna, if it could affect the survival of the co-op, the members should have a voice in that. If it involves policies for hiring or firing, the members definitely should have a voice in that. Or something that could impact the whole purpose for why you formed the cooperative in the first place, the members must have a voice in that. So either the members make the decision, or at least they are, the board should confer with the membership before it makes a decision. And again, what you want to avoid is calling a general membership meeting to handle routine policy issues. You don't want that, so that every other week or every other month, you've got to have a general membership, especially if you've got a large number of members. But for the critical issues, the very significant issues, then yes, the membership must be conferred, or they should make the decision. Any questions about that? I guess the next area of decisions, here we're looking at whether it's the management or that grievance committee that we set up to make the decision. Who makes the decision? And this is called the grievability test. Again, we were talking about having a person may have a grievance or a complaint against someone else, or even a member of management. Ideally, what you would want and what you would encourage them to do is try to address the matter themselves if they feel that they can do it in a non-confrontational manner. They should try to address the matter themselves. A lot of times it just takes talking to the person and pointing out some of the issues that you may have, some of the concerns that's there. Usually reasonable mind can come to some type of agreement and resolve it. But if not, if they have attempted this, or if for some reason you feel that it's not possible, then you could bring it to the grievance committee. Then the question comes, who decides? Once you've done this, who decides? Can you first attempt to resolve it directly with the person involved? That should always be the first step when possible. But if those attempts have failed, then turn it over to the grievance committee. And that's the reason for having a grievance committee, because you don't want some lingering complaint or some minor conflict to really throw a wrench in the dynamics of the co-op. Because there's going to be conflict, there's going to be interpersonal conflict. That's just a part of growing and developing as a team. That's one of the natural stages of group development, group dynamics. But what you don't want the conflict to do is get out of hand and derail the camaraderie that exists in the co-op, that should exist in the co-op. And that's I guess, the value of having that grievance committee, someone that you can go to get this stuff resolved. And it goes there once you felt that if the person feels that for some reason management hasn't been able to resolve it. For those cases, but you have management. And we look at this test. This test is called the grievability test. And we'll look at the items of this test. The next slide. One of the first questions is, does the complaint involve a violation of existing organizational policy? In other words, if is policy clear and whoever's on the management team just chose not to follow the policy? Second is, does the complaint deal with a situation for which there is no applicable policy? In other words, something novel, something which they haven't addressed before. And then does the complaint question the fairness of an existing policy? If you answer yes to any of these, then it goes to the grievance committee. If you answer no to each of these, then it's management that makes a decision. Now, if we have policy, and it's something that management can decide, they just need to follow policy. If the policy is fair, deemed fair, then it's something that management should handle. Again, if the member feel that policy is unfair, you can talk to the grievance committee and they agree, and they're in agreement, then they could make recommendations to the board to change the policy or modify the policy if needed. But that's called the grievability test. And these are the three tests that we look at when we try to determine in situations like this, who makes the decision? Is it management? Is it the board? Is it the membership? And this gives us some guidance on how we should address that. If y'all like, let's take about take a few minutes break. Then we'll come back and look at some of the structural considerations. And then we'll go into the activity. It's planned for the night.
Cool. Let's aim for, does 7:22 sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us back again. I think, Benny, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Yep, cool. All right, I think, are we good to keep moving then?
Yes.
Great.
All right, ready?
Yep.
Okay, next we want to look at some structures, some legal structures for the co-op, because they will have impact on your governance and some of the decisions you make regarding your policies for governance. Some of the considerations, and here they're listed, is the legal structure, taxation, how it could impact employment status, and your need for financing.
Sorry for interrupt, but I don't know if we have ERIs with the interpretation. I can hear him.
Okay. Rais are you available?
¿ERIs? Ok, ya te escucho. Gracias.
Okay. These are some of the structures that we're going to look at. And again, as I mentioned earlier, here in Tennessee, basically, particularly when I look at the LLC, but the other structure is, of course, the corporate structure. And of course, sole proprietorship isn't available to us as a co-op. In a partnership, and actually the LLC is very similar to a partnership in nature. Has some of the same advantages, but you can go to the next one whenever you like, right? And here's just some of the basic differences. Again, we don't have a cooperative corporation as a legal destination here in Tennessee, as some of the other states do. Therefore, you can either incorporate and choose to function as a cooperative, as a corporation, or you can form an LLC, limited liability company, and function as a cooperative. The subchapter T election is something you do for basically taxation purposes. And you can do that either as an LLC or as a corporation. And what it does is, for a corporation, it allows you to avoid the double taxation. You know, that's one of the biggest drawbacks of being incorporated, that you're taxed, the profits of the corporations is taxed. And then it's taxed again as a dividend and payout to the owners. So it's double taxation. A T Corp designation or electing the T Corp avoids the double taxation. For the LLC, of course, you don't have the double taxation, because the LLC, the profits are taxed as a pass-through to the owners. So you have surplus and profit pass-through. But the subchapter T would allow the LLC to perhaps retain earnings, because otherwise you'd have to pass through all the income and the members would have to pay taxes on it. Unless you had a subchapter T so that you can retain earnings, and the retained earnings wouldn't be taxable to the members.
Hey, Benny. This is Brendan. Just trying to find our own structure in here. And since I'm in Alabama, that may be some of where I'm missing it. But on a federal level, we're a C corporation.
Okay.
And which is a cooperative association. And so that allows us, as far as I understand, the kind of subchapter T benefits. So I was just looking at the right there. It says double taxation unless you're one of those two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think C Corp would be added to that list.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably a C Corp with a T election, because you can elect the T, subchapter T. I think
Okay,
all you have to do is just tell RIS, okay, have we elected to file as subchapter T? And that way you can avoid double taxation.
gotcha.
But here again, these are some of the differences, the contrast. Like with the corporation, you've got to have a board of directors. That's required. With an LLC, you don't. It's not required. You can choose to have one, but it's not required. And again, I guess one of the most difficulties with LLC is retained earnings, particularly if you're a co-op that wants to grow. And so you have to retain earnings in order to grow. But if you retain the earnings, they are still taxed to the individual members, unless you had a subchapter T. And that permanent capital LLC is it's another designation is basically entails forming a subsidiary. And I'm not going to get into that because I would like to get on so that we can actually get into the activity. In the subchapter T, I'll just mention that is special tax treatment for worker co-ops. It avoids the double taxation and it allows LLC to retain earnings. The drawback with it is that many of the employees or the workers are then viewed as, for employment purposes, through employment law, are then viewed as workers, as employees. So that's one of the drawbacks. And if you want to avoid that being viewed by the in employment law as an employee, then subchapter T may not be the way to go. I was going to look at the tax effect of this. This is something that, and that was the next slide, but we may want to skip that tonight because I really do want to get into this example. And we've got about 30 minutes left. And I want to give you some time to go over the activity. But what I was trying to show with this was that the impact of the subchapter T and the savings that it could allow you to realize in taxes, particularly compared to the corporate designation without the T. I can send you a write-up on this that will explain it and give you the details as to the savings that were possible, which make the subchapter T the preferred method using that designation when you can, either as a corp or as an LLC. But we won't go into that today. And then this is the subsidiary LLC that becomes a member, as if you choose not to become a subchapter T, you
Tengo
can
una
retain
pregunta.
earnings
Perdón.
by forming a subsidiary LLC that would be a member whose only function was to hold retained earnings. And you could designate that in your operating agreement that says a certain percentage of the earnings would go to the LLC. Therefore, the members through the pass-through would not have to pay taxes on the earnings retained.
Sí, perdón. Tengo una pregunta. ¿Cómo podemos ponerle el subtítulo a la LLC? ¿Eso se hace cuando se hacen los impuestos? ¿O se tiene que ir a registrar a algún lado? ¿O cómo es ese proceso?
Yeah, as an election, you take, I guess when you are about to file taxes, And you just let the IRS know that you elect to file as a subchapter T. It's not something that you have to apply for. It's just basically a notification. And as long as you are operating as a cooperative, you have that option. Does that answer the question?
Sí, gracias. Gracias.
Okay. Again, let's go to the next one. And on the next, I basically just wanted to point out the various structures that possible, even with the LLC, that you can choose to be member managed, manager managed, or board managed. Manager managed is where you have a management team. A board managed, of course, the members select the board of directors that manages the operation, or board, managing board, and member managed. The difficulties with, or the problems with a member managed LLC is that you have this thing called agency authority. And if you're member managed, then that means any member has the authority to enter into the co-op into a binding agreement. So that's the risk you have by having a member managed LLC. That's why some that member managed, they will elect or appoint a manager from the members. So that it would be manager managed, so that that manager would have be designated as the agent with authority to enter into binding contracts or binding agreements. Otherwise, every member would have that authority. And that could be a problem. That's the same problem with partnerships, that the partners are liable for the other partners' liabilities. Well, with this, when you're a member managed, you open yourself up to those extended liability, not so much liabilities, but the decisions in the binding agreement that any one individual member would make on behalf of the LLC. So it's probably better not to choose a member managed LLC and to elect either the manager managed or the board managed.
Benny, can you provide a few, like, I don't want to call them necessarily like, I guess exceptions where you would want to be member managed?
I think to overcome that, I guess the major drawback of that agency authority is if you spell out in the operating agreement that the authority that you have as a member is one that's held, what they call it, collegially. That means that the only authority is one in which you have as a collective and not individually.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah, and I think, and then thinking about what Lauren had mentioned, Lauren Regal, and to be member managed to, if there's questions of citizenship in Tennessee at the very least, to just make sure that member managed is perhaps easier to, or more equipped to invite membership to have all or any, I guess, citizenship status compared to manager managed. Is that what she had said?
And I don't recall, and I would suggest and recommend that one would talk to an attorney regarding any of these elections before you would pursue them. And particularly if you're concerned about the employment status, whether or not you would be viewed as an employee. When the whole goal, one of the purposes for some of us may be to definitely be viewed and defined as an owner. And it would have also employment law implications, employment tax implications as well. I apologize for the noise. Now, what I wanted to do, we want to look at this operating agreement. And there's a governance matrix that I also want to view. If we could put those up. But before you do, let's go to the next slide, because that really gets into, I'm sorry, the one after that. That's the matrix that shows who decides what. Okay. But here we want to look at, want to consider this scenario of new era windows. And here I'll just read this. It says, you are a part of a group of workers who've decided to take over the workplace when the owners chose to close the company. So you have to work fast to organize your group to now run this business. Using the tools that you have, develop an operating agreement. And here we're assuming we're forming an LLC for this new entity. And I'll give you the background. I had a little short clip. I don't think we have time to look at it, but I'll give you a little background as to what New Era. It was a window manufacturing company in Chicago, and the owner was going to close. And the workers, first they did a sit-in basically and took over the workplace. And there was a couple of iterations of them going back and forth. But what happened ultimately is the workers bought out the owners and became the owners of this company, New Era Windows. So as the owners of this company, and they really had to scramble to get it together. They had no management. It was just the workers. They now are owners of this company. So as the owners, your task is to develop the governance for this new company. So given the template, and we'll go back to the template, as well as the matrix, I want you guys to kind of think about some of the basic steps and basic parts of the governance policy that you would develop. And I'll very briefly, while Gretchen is pulling it up, just tell you some of the basic things that you should consider. And you'll see that on the template. One is membership. That should be covered in governance. How do you become a member? And how is membership terminated? Capital accounts. You know, there's two basic capital accounts. One is the collective accounts. That's the account of the cooperative as a whole. And the other one is the individual account, because each individual member will have their own capital account. It's almost like, say, a bank account or savings account. That's your individual capital account. So how are they accounted for in this new company? The surpluses, allocations, and distributions. How are profits and surplus accounted for? How is patronage distributed? And what happens if the membership is terminated? Board members, what are their powers? How are they elected? What are their terms? How are board members removed if necessary? When are the board meetings? And how do they make decisions? These are some of the basics of governance. Membership meetings. When do members meet? How do members vote and make decisions? Who's entitled to vote as a member? The officers and agents. Who are the officers and how are they appointed or assigned? And by office, I mean like secretary, treasurer, various officers of the cooperative. Who has agency authority? Remember, I just talked about agency authority. Who has it and what is the process? But these are some of the things that you should think about when you develop the governance. There's another model that equal exchange that done, the matrix actually. That would help you more to, if you had to do something quick and dirty, quick and fast, that model would be helpful. Not this one, but the other, the matrix would be helpful. And then you have the template. That's the matrix. Is there any way you can make that larger?
Yeah. Is there a certain page that the?
Yeah, the matrix. Yes, you showed it earlier.
Looks like page 26 on mine.
Okay.
Oh, just, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, back there.
Okay.
And that's the matrix, if you guys could read it. And sorry, once again, I've run short of time. But here, I'll go through it real quick so we can kind of see it. Let's look at some of the financial decisions where it shows, again, you got the I, which represents required input. The D is for the decision, and the R, what was the R? For review.
Ratifier. I think if you go
The
up,
key is at the top? Yeah.
No.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's at the top.
Mhm.
That's the one who has to review it or approve it or reject it. And here you said, for an example of creating the annual budget, that's something that the executive director or for our purposes, we'll say the management would create, but the board would have to ratify it. And here they call it the management council. That's the other body of managers who would have some input in it. But it's pretty obvious we're not going to have time to actually go through and sketch together a governance policy. But these are some of the decisions that we would make if we were. You know, like how do you become a member? And some of these are more evident when we look at the template, the actual operating agreement template. But some of these, like how will you amend the bylaws? Who would make that decision? Here you see it's the board, those two Ds, it's the board and the members. It was something that together they would decide. Again, because it's something that's significant, right? So the members would definitely have to be conferred with. They hired the executive director, that's the management. The board would do that. That's something that covers the day-to-day operations, the board would do it. with input from the members. The sale of Class A stock membership. So again, that's something that's, again, significance test is something that's affect membership. So definitely the members would be the ones who decide, as opposed to the Class B stock. And that's probably more like some type of investment share. Not so much someone who has a vote in the affairs of the co-op. Therefore, that's something that the board of directors would have the decision-making authority. But could you imagine being in the shoes of the members of New Era that basically overnight they became owners of a company, a co-op? And one of the things that they had to do, among the many thousands of things they had to do, was to think about the governance. Okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to organize and get this done? Which is why I was telling you when we start that developing your governance policy isn't something you're going to do comprehensively in one setting. What you want to do is get the basics initially and allow that to evolve over time through your understanding of your members and the members' needs and your preferences. And a lot of that will just evolve. So don't let it stress you out when it comes time to develop governance. The basics you want to take care of, like, okay, how do we get members? How do you join? How do we split the profits, or in this case, the patronage or the surplus? And I want to make the distinction between surplus and profits, because they're not the same. Surplus is the earnings that you make, the net earnings that the co-op makes through the labor of the members. Profits is the net earnings you make through the labor of non-members. So the surplus is something that is split between the members as surplus, as patronage. Whereas the profit is something that is retained or could be retained by the co-op as a collective earnings. So profits is something that belongs to the co-op as a whole, collectively. Whereas surplus is something that is divided among the members as patronage. So that's something that has to be, again, how the patronage is going to work, how much of that you give. That's something you put in your governance policy. And the neat things about the governance policy is that because it's an internal document, it's not something you have to file with the state. You can always modify it. If the membership decides that, hey, we need to make some changes, you can do that, and it's not going to cost you something. If it was something you had to file with the state, then you'd have to pay a fee each time you change something. But it's an internal document, so you're free to do that. Anyone have any general questions about governance or encountered any concerns in developing your governance for your co-op? Or have you got some experience you want to share with others?
Yo tengo una pregunta. Al principio mencionabas algo de los estatutos, que en Tennessee no se trabajan, las cooperativas no trabajan con estatutos. ¿Cuál es la diferencia de los estatutos y de la forma en la que se trabaja ahorita con las cooperativas aquí en Tennessee? Es un documento, acuerdo de operaciones.
What I meant was that some states that are really big in co-ops they have specific co-op laws. Whereas you can form a co-op and they have a law that governs that, where you can designate this as a co-op cooperative. A corporate cooperative. Like Brendan was saying, I guess in Alabama, Brendan, they have co-op designations.
They do have some. We actually incorporated in Minnesota, and we had to
Okay,
get the ability to do business in Alabama.
okay.
But yeah,
And
the
that was,
similarities, yes.
Minnesota is one of those states that have specific co-op designations. But see, Tennessee doesn't. Therefore, you have to form as another type of legal entity operating as a co-op. But they don't have a specific co-op legal entity.
Los estatutos son casi similar a los acuerdos de operaciones, ¿podría decirse?
No, the statute is just state law. It's basically state code, state laws that governs, I guess, how businesses can
Okay.
be organized. And that's something that we really need here in Tennessee, just some good co-op law that recognizes co-op as a legal entity on its own. But we don't, so we have to kind of go about it the roundabout way by forming some other legal entity and said that it's operating as a co-op. But that's all I mean when I say statute, it's just that it's a law.
Yeah, I would just kind of mention again what you had said before, Benny, is that the operating agreement isn't something that has to be set in stone, and it does not legally have to be filed with the state,
That's
which
right.
allows it to be a living, breathing document.
Yeah.
As more and more, like if you add more members or your membership changes or all of those things, it allows for that flexibility because it's not, it is a legal document, but it is not something that needs to be filed with the state.
Ok, gracias.
Guys, I apologize. I got someone cutting my yard here in the middle of the night, so.
That's all right, Penny. I was just gonna say, we have about 3 minutes left. So if we have like time for one more question, that would be great. If anyone has it, but then Rosemarie and Benny, I'm not sure if you want to mention the law clinic, just kind of like, right, I guess just kind of a reminder how we can work with you to get you to this law clinic. If anyone else has a quick question.
Yeah, if there are no questions or you're still thinking about it, we work with the Vanderbilt Community Enterprise Law Clinic, and Lauren Rogala is the director, and she's been helping us, help cooperatives like form their legal entities, helping with the operating agreement. So if you're ready for that stage, then please contact us. We have a form with some questions to consider first. And once you've gone through, there are about 28 to 30 questions. Once you've thought about all of these, then we'll go through that with you, and then we'll contact the legal clinic to see if they have capacity and can then work with us. The great thing about the legal clinic is that it's free, and so that's always really helpful.
Thanks for that. Benny, do you have any final words before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to say that if anyone had any questions about this or anything else by governors, feel free to contact me. I'll do what I can to answer your question. I would strongly recommend that you talk to an attorney, especially when it comes to choosing about your legal entities and what are some of the implications are. But some of this material, I will, if you don't have it, I can send it to you, especially the templates for operating agreement or bylaws. I'll be more than happy to send those to you. You can apply what may be applicable to your situation, or if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And again, I apologize for the noise here.
Thanks for throwing that up there, Rosemary. Yeah, thank you all for coming again. Benny's email is in there, as well as Rosemary, and my own email is also in there. If you have any and all questions, we'll be happy to answer those. If you could take this evaluation right now, that would be great. If you're cool with the QR code. Otherwise, I'll be sending along the evaluation with the slides for today and hopefully the recording to you all as well by next week. So yeah, thank you all again for coming. I hope you have enjoyed the rest of your night is an easy night, and we look forward to catching up with you all soon.
Yeah, thank you all for doing this again.
Well,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
coming, Brenda. Nice seeing you.
Yeah, you guys too.
Thank you all.
Muchas gracias por la información, la verdad es de mucho interés, hay muchas cosas muy importantes que han dicho que nosotros desconocíamos y nada, simplemente agradecerles y ojalá pudiera haber un poquito de más información en cuanto a otras necesidades que pueden tener las cooperativas. Pues nosotros estaríamos encantados de poder tomarlos.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Hi, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Suresh. Yeah, great job. All right, thanks, Benny. That was real insightful.